So the idea is that you should be looking for this initial large market. You should segment it down from your TAM into your SAM. And then from there, figure out who's the lowest hanging fruit that you could go after for your go-to market strategy. It's about telling 3 micro stories. So your 3 micro stories are your opportunity story. Your second story is your financial story. And your third story is your credibility story. When you're pitching your startup, don't create a 43-page deck. Pitch it in a really concise way. And what I do is on every one of my slides, I normally have what I call a power statement. I can read the power statements from every slide and in 1 minute get the entire gist of the startup concept, right? When you're presenting your deck, you have the ability to say all the extra stuff. You're not going to have that opportunity, so your deck needs to stand on its own. So know that when you're sending out your deck, you're not going to be able to talk over it. They're going to look at it, evaluate it, and the decision that I can cut to simplify it. And then I look for slides that I could cut. Do I need all the slides that I have? Once they understand all the pieces, they don't have clarifying questions, they have qualifying questions. So when people start asking you clarifying questions, well, I don't understand how this works. Well, it's really one goal, and it's not even to raise capital. It's to get the call. It's to set up the meeting so that you have the chance to sell and to understand who that investor is.
So I was just going through your profile, and you're sort of talking about, okay, make TAM, SAM, SOM the foundation of your GTM strategy. So can you please talk more about that?
Yeah, so I think that when startups are going through the process of creating their pitch deck, what I see a lot is that the founder will glaze over this slide. They'll glaze over the TAM, SAM, SOM, and they'll glaze over their go-to market strategy. And really, your TAM, SAM, SOM becomes the foundation of your go-to market strategy. And so what I like to tell founders is don't glaze over those 2 slides. Dive deep into your TAM, SAM, SOM, which I believe a lot of founders miscalculate. A lot of times what they do is they'll go into a Google search and they'll be searching up a market. And the numbers that they find really have nothing to do with their business and their pricing. And so the idea is that you should be looking for this initial large market. You should segment it down from your TAM into your SAM. And then from there, figure out who's the lowest hanging fruit that you could go after for your go-to market strategy, where you're taking into account a few things. Number one, who's going to have the shortest sales cycles? Number 2, where are you going to be able to find this type of client in large quantities? Number 3, who's going to be most affected by your minimum viable product? Especially if you're pre-seed and you're looking to build that minimum viable product. And also, who can you get in front of? Who's accessible as far as decision makers? So sometimes when these founders are looking at their go-to market strategy and they're thinking they're going to go enterprise, that may not be the way to go for your initial customers. You may want to pick some lower hanging fruit. So when you're looking at your TAM, SAM, and SOM, it really starts to create that pathway to those initial users.
Okay, that's awesome. So I think while you're talking about the GTM, you had these very awesome questions that you've shared. Okay, you need to look at this and this. So what are some of the questions to refine your TAM, SAM, SOM? So how would you sort of give this is the framework to think about those, and because Google search will not work over there.
So I think every startup is different. So, but the general principles. And let me start with what I see happening a lot, where I find there are a lot of mistakes. So what'll happen is a founder will say, I sell iPhone cases, okay? And I sell them for $1. And what they'll do is they'll start doing a Google search of the iPhone or smartphone market. And smartphones are selling for a lot more than an iPhone case, right? So what they're doing is they're taking the entire smartphone market at smartphone prices and they're creating their TAM, which is really comparing apples and bowling balls. It doesn't match up. So I think that the first thing that you want to do is you want to lock in your price point. And then you want to find the largest user base that you can find, which is going to be your TAM. So you're going to take those users, and this is a very oversimplification of the whole thing, but you take those users times the price of your product. What can you get for your product? And that creates your TAM. Your SAM starts to become a segmentation where you're saying, you know what? We can't go after, with our limited resources, limited funds, we can't go after the entire world or the entire smartphone market. So we're going to segment, and we think we have the best chance in going after this type of client. This client will be really good for us, and we'll be really good for them. And then your SOM becomes what you can actually capture. So what I think that people need to prepare is they need to prepare their product pricing. They need to prepare their go-to-market strategy as far as your segmentation, and they need to prepare their projections. So they need to understand, how are we going to ramp up and where are we going to get to? And I think those are the preparation points for doing that.
Well, okay, awesome. So coming to your another tweet or your thing that you mentioned is a pitch deck is not 13 slides. A pitch deck is 3 micro stories.
Yeah.
Tell me more about that.
Yeah. So a lot of times I'll see all of these pitch deck templates out there, and all these pitch decks, like from Y Combinator, they have their series, which is great. This is how you do a pitch. But what I really want people to get across is it's not how many slides. And I believe you should have around 13 slides. You shouldn't have 20 or 40 slides. But within those 13 slides, it's not so much about checking the boxes for each slide. It's about telling 3 micro stories. So your 3 micro stories are your opportunity story. Your second story is your financial story. And your third story is your credibility story. And basically how I like to position it is, your opportunity story is, here's our problem, here's our solution, and here's how big the market is of the people that have the problem. So there's an opportunity here, and it's big enough opportunity. The second is the financials, which really starts with the TAM, SAM, and SUM, your market. So this is how big it is. This is what we charge. This is what we're projecting in X amount of years, right? So here's the financial story. And then the third story is the credibility story. This is how we plan to go get customers. This is what we've done so far, and this is our team. And so if you're looking at telling those stories, it almost doesn't really matter how many slides you have, as long as you're focused on telling those stories. Because if you're not focused on those stories, or you don't go back and look at the entire deck and say, do I have these 3 stories or don't I have 3 stories? You're creating just these siloed slides that don't connect to each other. And then it helps you when you're crafting your story to craft it in that way.
Okay, that's awesome. So obviously when you're pitching it, and your idea is pitch your startup like your phone is about to die.
Yeah. So that really comes down to, when you're pitching your startup, don't create a 43-page deck. Pitch it in a really concise way. And what I do is, on every one of my slides, I normally have what I call a power statement. I can read the power statements from every slide, and in 1 minute get the entire gist of the startup concept, right? And that's what we really want founders to do. So for example, if you have a founder, they're going to spend, or if you have an investor, they're going to spend about a minute on the deck. They're going to skim the deck to see if it meets their criteria for their portfolio, okay? If it doesn't, it's going to go in the garbage. If it does, you may get the phone call. All you're trying to do is get to that phone call, right? So I had a customer that I was working with that was a founder. He had a 43 slide deck. It was wall-to-wall copy. And so I was doing a review with him, and I stopped him at like 27 slides. I'm like, my man, you got to stop here. Like, you're dead in the water with this deck. So he was having a hard time raising money. So he and I wound up building a 13 slide deck. He recirculated to the exact same investors, and he was able to get 10 meetings, and he raised his full round inside of 14 days, checks in hand. So the difference between having an investor look at your deck and try and read everything and learn everything about your business is not the opportunity. The opportunity is to give them the condensed version, to tease them into this idea, of this startup, see if it meets their criteria, and get to that next phone call. And that's your whole objective.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So in terms of questions, you may ask before starting working with anybody. So what are those questions? What are your favorite questions I ask before you take on a client?
I like to understand what they've done so far. So I like to understand where they are in the process. I like to understand, sometimes people come to me with just an idea. So for an example, a client that I didn't initially take, they came to me with the example where it was just in the idea phase. And I told them, you're at a point where you don't have enough information to create a deck. So what I wound up doing with them is I wound up working with them for a while. And I kind of acted a bit as a co-founder and helped them flesh out the idea. And then from there, we got it to a point where we could build a deck. So really what I'm looking for is I'm looking for people that have a full concept. And then from there, we can refine. Because I've been in the startup world. I'm an entrepreneur myself. I've started companies. I've taken companies apart, rebuilt them, and sold them. Like I've gone through all the pieces, and they tend to be a Swiss Army knife for startups. So I understand branding, marketing, process, and I love all the pieces of it. I've been in the CEO seat. I've been in the chief strategy officer seat, and everything in between. So what I'm able to do is work with the founders to find where their holes are. And a lot of times it's not in the general concept, it's in the little pieces. It's in their business model, it's in their go-to-market strategy, it's in their whatever the pieces are. And so to give you an example, there was a group that came to me that had a technology, and they were having a hard time raising money. And they were asking me, why do you think we're having a hard time raising money? And the primary reason was their business model. I convinced them to change their business model into a licensing model. I said, redo your projections, change this to a licensing model. I think you're going to see your profit margins go way up. You're going to make a ton of money. And I think the market is going to be more interested in this concept. We rebuilt their deck, and they were able to raise money where they weren't able to raise money for like 6 months. And so as soon as they changed the concept, they were able to raise money. So when I talk to a client from the initial standpoint, I'm doing a little bit of the business evaluation. I give them my honest feedback on it. It doesn't mean I'm always going to be right, but I give them my honest feedback on it, and I try and help them fine tune. But you need to come with a complete concept. It needs to be a complete solution, and then we can kind of fine tune the pieces.
Okay, that's awesome. So in terms of startups are at seed stage and Series A stage and later on and all of that. So how does your approach changes in terms of creating the pitch deck for different stages and for maybe different industries?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. The main story tends to stay the same. However, it's the tone of the story that changes. So for example, I was doing a Series B, and at that point, the company is looking to now just scale like crazy. They've created product market fit, and they're looking to scale. So it really the story starts to change mostly in the traction slide. So the traction slide becomes the base for it. So at pre-seed, you have very limited types of traction. As soon as you hit seed, you're starting to develop some initial traction. You're getting to that Series A. You're going through your product market fit, and then you're getting to that Series B, and you're saying we're ready to scale. Whatever phase you're at, that's the story you're trying to tell. That's the story you're trying to weave in, is that we've kind of checked the boxes to get to the next level. So there was a group that came to me, and they were looking to raise Series A. They had barely launched their MVP. They had no data. They had nothing to prove. So we didn't have a lot of traction in that capacity. So I was advising them in a little bit of a different way. But you're really looking to tell the investor the story in the phase you're at. And so you're trying to prove that you've checked the boxes within that phase. And that's how the story will change from series to series.
And in terms of the actual pitch deck, you're sending it to your investors in an email. So you want how much info or how much text should be there in the slide? Should they be able to read and understand all of it? Or do you need somebody to go and pitch and make those things understandable?
You're not going to have an opportunity to go pitch it. That's what I tell everybody. You have 1 minute. They're going to skim your deck, read the biggest, boldest text. They're going to hit 13 slides, and they're going to know if they want to call you or not. That's it. They're professionals at this. They have looked at deck after deck after deck, and they know what they're looking for. So when you're presenting, you cannot. When you're presenting your deck, you have the ability to like say all the extra stuff. You're not going to have that opportunity. So your deck needs to stand on its own. So know that when you're sending out your deck, you're not going to be able to talk over it. They're going to look at it, evaluate it, and the decision's made. You're either going to get the phone call or you're not.
Okay. So in terms of the many templates out there, there's a Y Combinator template out there.
Sure.
So should people just take those up, fill those in, and start the process?
You know, I think that that's what a lot of people do. I think it's very difficult for people to take that and actually make it work. I mean, I think last month I reviewed over 30 pitch decks, and I was doing reviews for people and kind of looking at it. The problem is that the slide strategy that they have is not a bad strategy, but founders have a hard time understanding what to put in and what to take out. So founders are so excited about their project and they feel like they need to tell you everything about it that they wind up writing paragraphs. And although it fills and checks the box of a problem slide or a solution slide, they're telling you too much information. And that's where I think a lot of founders get stuck. They have a hard time eliminating information out of the deck because they're so close to it and they don't know what to eliminate. So it's really important if you're going to follow some sort of template, that you have a story strategy in place ready to plug in there. Other than that, it's only going to give you a base loose outline.
Okay, that's awesome. So raising money in current environment. So what tips do you have? I mean, is there anything special that people need to do to make their pitch stand out and get some funding?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to realize it's going to take a little bit of time in most cases. I think like where the gentleman that I was working with raised in 14 days is kind of unheard of. But what I would like to point out with that case was he had the right idea. He communicated it in the right way to the right people. And that's really the three pieces. So when you're putting out your deck, you're looking to build a large list of lead investors that invest in the space you're in, and know that it's just going to take time. There's going to be a process. But in addition to that, make sure that you're prepared with everything that you need. So your pitch deck is done. Make sure your financials are done. Make sure all the pieces that you need are ready to go. So when you do have somebody that's interested in investing, you jump into that meeting with them, you finish it off, and hopefully move it towards some sort of term sheet. So I think that, and you know, there's a lot of great people out there that advise on the investing. I could recommend a couple of them. One of them is Michael Ho. If anybody wants to follow him, he's fantastic. But really, it's about putting together that strategy to get to those investors and making sure you have everything aligned.
Okay, that's awesome. So in terms of this AI and Gen AI and everything that is out there, so I mean, there are so many tools out there that claim to do this and that, and so I mean, again, are those helpful? Are those misleading? So how do you see them?
I don't know that I've seen anything that has really melted my face off just yet. I think that I've seen people come to me and they've used AI tools and they haven't raised money. And then when we put the human element into it, their deck gets better. I think that like AI is at a point where it's grabbing what's out there. It's doing its best job to create information. But at the point we're at, I haven't seen anything that's like producing a finished deck. There still needs to be an understanding of how to position your startup so it makes sense for investors. There needs to be an understanding of the right information, and it's very difficult for AI to extract that information from the founders. A lot of times, if I'm working with the founder to build their deck, I'm extracting the information from them. I'm pulling the information, and I do it from the standpoint of an investor. What would I want to know? What do I need to pull out of them? How do I need to push them and challenge them to give me the right information so that we can create a compelling case of why this startup should be funded? And that's something that I don't see AI doing right now.
Okay. So maybe for the audience, you've talked about micro stories. You've sort of like reviewed these 30 pitch decks in the last 30 days. So what are some of the things that you've seen? And what's the anatomy of a great slide deck? Maybe, okay, they should have this, and maybe you can just care to elaborate?
Yeah, so that's kind of a big question, but I guess I could say some of the things that I see that founders do, some of the big items that I think they do that they get incorrect is number one, way too much text. Chop down, most of you can chop down 90% of your text. That's how much text you shouldn't put in there. The second thing is the design. Sometimes it's way over designed. So it's either way over designed or there's big, bold fonts everywhere and your eye doesn't know where to go. So from a design standpoint, I like to tell people if you're just starting out, you can have a simple white background, pick a nice font, and create a font hierarchy. So the font hierarchy is your most important information is the biggest, secondary smallest, and third is the smallest of all the fonts, right? So give me a place to look. Don't put lots of charts and graphs that are complicated in your deck. I know everybody wants to create their tech stack and show me where everything points to and how your AWS servers are doing whatever. Nobody cares. That's just the reality. Nobody cares to dissect your entire tech stack in a diagram. It's just not what they're going to do. They're not going to spend the time to do that. Another thing that I'm seeing a lot of are people are putting videos in their pitch deck or links to videos. You have a minute. If your video is more than 10 seconds, it's really not going to do it. If you want to put that at the end of your deck or as a supplementary item, I think that that's okay. But otherwise, save it for the conversation. So I think that those are some of the biggest things that I'm seeing that people are doing is that they're overpopulating it with content. Their design is either extremely congested or their font hierarchy doesn't help them. And then in addition to that, they're adding things like graphs and charts that are hard to dissect, or things like videos that are just not going to be watched in this first round.
Okay. And what's your anatomy of an ideal pitch deck? Like, how would you sort of like structure it?
So I'm going to say this. If you're an entrepreneur, you should be okay going rogue. So pick whatever your format's going to be, but do whatever you need to do to tell your story. That being said, I like to look at like a 13-page deck, which has a title and a thank you at the end. So you have 11 slides to tell your story. One of the reasons that I like that is it forces you to tell the story in the most concise, economical manner. And so normally it is your basic slides. It's your problem, your solution, and so on. But to me, it really doesn't matter. Tell the story in the way that's going to get the startup invested. And so if you're not comfortable going rogue, you're probably not comfortable being a founder. So you have to have a little bit of rogue in you as a founder. It's okay to do that with your pitch deck as well. So where some people are saying you have to stick to this format, it's the only format, I don't believe in that. Even with my own format, as I'm building decks for people, I kind of have a way that I like to do it, slides that I like to start with, but I change it up all the time because there's something really compelling about some information that I need to get into the deck. And that's more important than checking the box on having a vision slide or a mission slide. Like that doesn't matter. I'm going to substitute out what I need to make sure that that story is told properly.
Okay, and in terms of an experience, so obviously you're sending those decks maybe through a LinkedIn message or maybe through the email. So any tips over there? So how do you sort of like package it and how do you send it so as to get opened and gets read?
So, a lot of times, and there are people that again are better at the sending part than I am, and the investor list than I am. But in my experience, it's always been reaching out to, especially if you're early stage, reaching out to those angel groups. And normally what happens is you're sending your deck to somebody that's appointed for that group for that month to bring in decks and founders. And so you're sending out that deck, trying to get a call embedded from that person to be brought in to pitch to the entire group. So you're looking through a ton of databases, you're building your lists, you're sending out those decks and those emails, and I really like finding groups. So finding your angel groups, or even finding your pitch deck competitions where you can hit a lot of people in one shot. It's totally okay to pitch one-on-one. There's nothing wrong with that. But especially in this early stage, you'll get a lot of feedback quickly. And so like I've been involved with my startups in pitch deck competitions and pitching to angels. And we found that we get a lot of feedback really quickly. And you may also get some people in the group that want to invest and others that don't in the angel groups. As far as the competitions go, you're just getting a lot of exposure. There are people there that are looking, that are going to say no, and then other people that will say, hey, I'm not interested, but I know somebody that is. And I have heard that through the competitions, you'll see somebody that doesn't win the competition, but makes the connection to the people that actually invest because they got the exposure to the competition. So although like the one-on-one pitches, there's nothing wrong with that. You got to get the money wherever you're going to get it. I think like definitely have some groups in there, some angel groups or competitions that you can get in front of a lot of people to expedite that networking effect of people connecting you.
Okay, and while you're sending those decks, what's the ultimate objective? Obviously, the ultimate objective is to raise capital, but what are maybe the intermediate goals? So is it like
it's really one goal, and it's not even to raise capital. It's to get the call. It's to set up the meeting so that you have the chance to sell and to understand who that investor is, right? So as much as you're selling them, they're selling you too, right? So what we're looking for is the opportunity to get in front of them and have this good one-on-one conversation or one-to-many conversation. And so that's it. If you're looking at your pitch deck to try and get you a check, you're going to build it wrong. You're looking for your pitch deck to get you a call, and that's it. That's the whole objective of the pitch deck. And that's where I think a lot of founders go wrong, is they're thinking this deck is going to sell my whole everything. It's not. They're going to want to talk to you. They're going to want to look at the person that they're going to give money to really decide, is this the right path for my investment?
Okay, that's awesome. So what are some of the unconventional elements that you've used in decks that work very effectively that people might not be aware of?
That's a really good question. I would say that what I do that I think other people don't necessarily do, and this goes back to the question of, having a standard deck that you modify, is I do what I call blending of slides. So I don't want this to become a 20-page deck. So what I like to do is look at information that I'm trying to get in, know that I don't have room for it, but work it into the story anyway. Whether it's, my why now information is really good, but I have other information that's more important. So I'll somehow bake the why now information, some of the trend information or whatever it is, into my problem slide. And I think that you have to be really conscious of how your story elements flow together, so you can bake them or blend them together into one specific slide and get the information across really quickly. And so a lot of times at the end of a deck, I do a review of the deck and I look for a couple of things. I look for things that I could take out design-wise that overcomplicate it. I look for words that I can cut to simplify it. And then I look for slides that I could cut. Do I need all the slides that I have? And I go through that elimination process to get it down to its simplest form. And then frankly, I find somebody that I think is, part of my team that is difficult to pitch, and I pitch them. I'll pitch them on that deck and I'll say, do you understand the concept? Do you understand the opportunity? Do you understand the financial story and the credibility story? And if they say yes to all of them, then I know I've done the job. One of the things that I think is really important, that when you're talking to people to get feedback on your deck, don't ask them for broad general feedback. Go to somebody and ask them those questions. Say, did you understand the opportunity? Did you understand the financial story? Did you understand the credibility? And then ask them, was there anything that you didn't understand? Was there anything you had to read multiple times? And was there anything that would give you pause if you were an investor? If you start asking them for general feedback, they're going to give you feedback on everything from design to your co-founders to just the general everything about it. And when you're collecting all that feedback, founders feel that it's really important to take that feedback and shove it in their deck, and it becomes a junk drawer. And it really becomes what I call the Frankenstein deck, where all of a sudden it becomes 43 slides of what everybody said, and the story makes no sense. It lost all of its pathway. And so I think that, like, when you're going through and you're getting the feedback, it's important to get very specific, focused feedback so you know what to change.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So, okay, so choose between this 80% story, 20% numbers, or 20% story and 80% numbers. Which deck would you prefer?
Which one's going to get me the dollars? So, I think it depends, because if your numbers are really good, you're probably going to lead with a lot of numbers. If your numbers aren't really good, you're not. So there's no, like, again, there's no one way to do this. When you're a founder, an entrepreneur, or you're creating a pitch deck, you have to do what I call play jazz flute, right? You're going to have to improvise quite a bit. You're going to be doing that from the pitch deck all the way through your Series B. As a founder, you're going to be pivoting, and you're going to need to do that quite a bit. So it's the same thing. There's never really a set 80-20. It's what is going to get me the investment. That's what you're looking for. At the same time, it's what's going to get me the customer. It's what's going to keep my team happy. It's what's going to keep, our processes moving. There's never a template for everything. You have to be able to pivot and play a little bit of jazz flute.
Yep. Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. So, when is your pitch deck ready?
I think your pitch deck is ready when you have the 3 stories in there, and you can take it and bring it to some trusted friends, advisors, people in the community, and have them look at it and know that they understand all the pieces. And then once they understand all the pieces, they don't have clarifying questions, they have qualifying questions. So when people start asking you clarifying questions, well, I don't understand how this works. Well, what did you mean by? You're not done. When they start asking qualifying questions, which, have to do with the business itself, how are you going to spend the money? How are you planning on this? Those are qualifying questions. That's when you know your pitch deck is ready. The last thing you want to do is be in the meeting with an investor that happens to give you their time, and they're asking a bunch of clarifying questions. The conversation will spin out of control, and you'll lose it from the beginning. You want them walking in saying, I understand the concept. I want to go a little bit deeper, and I want to qualify whether this is the right investment for my portfolio. So when you're putting your deck out for the initial reviews, if you're getting a lot of clarifying questions, I don't understand the problem you're solving. I don't understand the market. I don't understand the solution. I don't understand how you're going to XYZ. You're not done. You haven't effectively told your story.
Okay, that's awesome. So one side question, just a personal question. So
Yeah.
why not you're building another startup, or maybe not doing a VC or fund of that sort?
Why am I not doing it?
Yeah.
So, it's kind of an interesting story. So, I've been an entrepreneur since I was, this big. And I was, I've always been fascinated by business. I was raised by entrepreneurs. They pulled me out of school to go to meetings. And I think I read my first contract when I was 12 years old. So, so I've always had a fascination with entrepreneurship. I started my first startup really young. I grew, it was a small startup, grew from 0 to 10,000 clients worldwide. I was really young, and so by the time all of my friends were about 30, they started coming to me for advice, and I started getting involved in other businesses, other startups. What I realized was I don't like to be in one startup for too long. I have about a 3-year shelf life before I lose my mind. And I need to be involved in a lot of projects. And so really, because I have this unique skill set where I like to build process, I like design, I like marketing, I understand all the pieces. I like to always look at a business like a machine, and I do understand all the pieces. I've run social media campaigns. I actually have a product design degree. I love process. I love like team building and culture. I've been the CEO. I've been the chief strategy officer. So I am a Swiss Army knife, and I like to plug in at all the different areas. Normally, at about the 3-year range, your team is getting bigger. All of a sudden, I get to use less of my tools because we have more people on the team, and I start getting really bored. And so I found that getting in at the level of a pitch deck gives me the opportunity to use all my skills, but it also, frankly, gives me the opportunity to meet the founder, look at the idea, and see if I want to get involved at a deeper level. Have I thought of creating a fund? Yeah, I've actually, in some of the companies that I've invested with, I've talked to the founders, and I've said, I'm doing pitch decks. I'm helping startups right now, and at some point, I think we should start a fund. And we've kicked around the idea, and it's something that I'm thinking of doing in a year or two. But right now, I just enjoy the process. I love doing this. I love like getting a new startup client every week and just working through stuff with them and being involved in it and being able to make a lot of impact very quickly. As soon as you have money and you're growing and you're doing things, the ship gets harder and harder to turn. But if I get you at that early phase, I can make a lot of impact really quickly. And that's what I really enjoy doing.
Oh, okay. That's an awesome story. So I've gone through your website. I love the design. And the copy. And so tell me how much of your input is in there?
The design?
The design and the copy, everything.
The whole thing. I wrote everything. I built the site myself. And I think that's what I mean. Like if I start a company, other than the extreme technical part, I can be almost a one-man band. I can do most of it. So like I could conceptualize the company, I can build the pathway for it, I could set up the website, build the brand, write the copy. If I need to run social media ads, I could run social, like I have all the pieces. So like when you look at my site, I wrote it, I knew what I wanted to do, I put the site together, I launched it. So yeah, that was me.
That's awesome. Okay, so is this site more of a branding site, or is it like converting for you also?
Yeah, the site converts for me, but I would have to say that right out of the gate, most of my customers are coming from LinkedIn. So people are reading my content, they're looking at it, they're reaching out to me. I've created some relationships with various organizations that help startups that are looking for people to help with pitch decks. So people do come to my site, and I would say that the site converts, but most of it actually does come through LinkedIn. And I love that kind of direct messaging, one-on-one. Somebody could reach out to me and we could have a conversation no matter where I'm at. I enjoy that. My wife, she's kind enough to let me just talk to startups anytime I can, because I just love it. If I could wake up and talk about this all day, I would. And really, that's why I'm doing this. So yeah, I think that the site converts. I just recently built a second site that I haven't fully launched yet. It's in beta form, but it's an online program for pre-seed founders. And those pre-seed founders will be able to go through, and I built out a video library of exactly my formulas for creating copy and everything else from design. And I built a master template that they could use it on beta testing right now. So being able to just launch that on my own, I did that one as well. So but yeah, it's meant to convert for sure.
Okay. So, where can people find you? So obviously, we're talking
So
about your
they can go
website. So
to so they could go to Ronga RONGA.co, and that'll be the basics. You can find me on LinkedIn, Anthony Ronga. Just look me up, you'll see me. And and you know, I really enjoy all the interaction that LinkedIn has created, the community that LinkedIn has built. I found was so inviting. You know, LinkedIn a decade ago was a very different place. Today, it's a great place to interact with people, not only just potential customers, but also, you know, networking, finding people. I mean, I would say that I'm taking 50 calls a month, whether they're potential customers and or networking. I've met people from all over the world, which has just been like fantastic. And I get to meet new people all the time. I also get the opportunity to interact with people, you know, a lot of like college level entrepreneurs. And I love that. I went to Arizona State University. I've been a guest speaker there a few times. I love interacting with the young entrepreneurs. I find that so fun. So, you know, LinkedIn gives me that opportunity to do that. I get a DM, I get a question every now and again, and I'm happy to fire off an answer if I have the time, you know, and set up meetings and talk to people. And I just enjoy the interaction. I happen to be a really big extrovert. If you haven't noticed, talking is not a problem for me. So, you know, like having those interactions are fun.
Oh, okay, that's awesome. So, so maybe the last question, or maybe two more. Oh, so one is obviously, so what's your process like? Is it like in person? Do you enjoy being in person, sitting next to somebody
Say it
and
again,
talking
you broke
to
up.
them? Yeah, so I'm asking, how do you enjoy this process? Is it like in person meeting with the founders and talking, or is it like online? Does online work? What's your
No,
process like?
I'm a talker. So I like
Okay.
so when I sign a client, and I only take so many a month. So I'm looking at what you're, you know, who you are. I'm looking at what the idea is, and then I'm selecting the pitch decks that I do. When I meet with somebody initially, that's what I'm looking for. And then once I sign them as a client, I normally have 3 meetings with them, 2 to 3 meetings. It just kind of depends. And they're just working sessions. So I'll do 90-minute working sessions with the customer, and I'm extracting information, and we're doing this through Zoom. And it's going back and forth, and we're really rolling up our sleeves and, you know, getting our hands dirty and getting into it. And me asking those questions about, you know, those hard questions, because I want them to know where their holes are in their pitch, and I want to help them fill them. So we're doing those 90-minute sessions. I'm extracting it from them, and then I'm building the deck. A lot of times I build the deck, we do some light modifications, and then we're done. Most of the time, I don't go back and do a lot of modifications, and I don't for a few reasons. One, I'm going to deliver you the deck that I would want to walk into an investment room with. So that's how I'm doing it. Second, normally I'm a better designer than you, so I'm not doing revisions, and I keep everything like super duper simple. So there's really not a lot of room for like the ongoing. So normally we have a deadline. I like to keep the deadlines. Sometimes the deadline is imposed by an investor meeting. Sometimes it's imposed by need because they need to raise capital immediately. But I don't like to drag on projects. I like to get them done. I like to be concise and quick. So I only take so many clients per month so that I can really focus and spend time. But I get to know all the founders, and I get to become friends with all the founders, and I really enjoy everybody I'm working with. And at this point in my life, I'm taking a page out of Frank Sinatra's book. If I'm going to work, I just want to work with my friends. I want to work with good people. I want to enjoy what I'm doing. And Frank Sinatra, the later part of his career, he made movies with just his friends. And really, that's what I like to do. I like to work with people I like.
Okay, that's awesome. So, would love to be your friend. So
we are friends. You got it.
Okay, so any parting comments, anything that I've missed, please, if you want to add.
You know, I think that for any founder, especially new founders, there's a lot of patience that has to be there. You have to have patience through this process. You have to have patience through the raising of capital, through that initial MVP to going to market. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs. It's a really, really bumpy road. And what I really recommend to people that are starting out as founders, besides the pitch deck, besides the startup, besides all that, is surround yourself with other founders. If you don't surround yourself with other founders, you're going to feel very alone. And I think it's really important that we support each other, and I show you my scars and you show me yours. And you have people around you that understand the pain you're going through and the journey you're going through. If you have a family that never started a business, they can only support you so far. You need to find people that know when you're down can help pick you up. And you need to find those cheerleaders. And you need to find people that have been in the position before you. So when you come to them and you're like, I have a major problem. We're running out of money and I need to pivot, that you can have your really like your cabinet for like President of the United States. You have your team of people that you can go to saying, the ship is going down, I need help. And that you could be honest and open and get help when you need it, but also just get that emotional support because you're going to need it. It's a bumpy road.
Yeah. Okay. That's an awesome advice. And I personally know the importance of those moments and those talks. So
yeah.
So again, Anthony, it was an amazing session. And I actually learned a lot. So, and I think the users will enjoy this a lot. So,
well, I appreciate you having me. It was a ton of fun.
Yeah.
I enjoyed doing it. Thanks for reaching out, and I'm glad we connected. Yeah. And yes, now we have a new friend, right?
So Anthony, it was really nice talking to you. Have a nice
Great talking to you too. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay.